Another day, another journey into the beating heart of the cactus culture of Sydney, Australia. Today I'm on my way to a very new cactus nursery called Cactus Vision, run by owners Erin and Carl. It's located in the suburb of Tempe, which is in the gentrified inner urban industrial belt, a suburb that typically, from an outsider's perspective, I'd associate with very high property prices and a string of very trendy craft beer breweries. What am I going to find? I've got no idea. I'm imagining though, a lot of very trendy plants for very trendy people. Will it be deeper than that? Let's stick around and find out, shall we? I guess the thing you've got to know about cactus growers in Australia is they probably fall into three categories. There's the people who are looking for a plant that's drought hardy that they can just stick in the garden. This is the driest continent on earth, allegedly, and a lot of people just want something they can bung in the ground and ignore it, and it'll just survive whatever horrific climatic conditions this country throws at it. The second group of people, you know, on a scale of madness and lunacy, the second group of people are about midway. They're people who have probably migrated from other plants, particularly, I suppose, indoor plant growers, people who jumped on that trend in the midst of COVID especially, and now they're kind of trying to branch out and find other ways to express their mania for collecting plants. So new people to cacti and succulents who are experienced with plants, and they're the sorts of people who I imagine, generalizing, really kind of follow trends, but you know, I could very well be wrong. Abuse me in the comments please if I am wrong. And then the third group of people, I'd imagine the smallest niche, very tiny subset of people, the people like me who are just maniacs and lunatics who, you know, live and breathe cacti and succulents all day, every day. The die-hard collectors. I'm hoping that Cactus Vision has a bit to cater to everyone, but I guess we'll find out soon enough, won't we? So here I am. I've made it. I'm at Cactus Vision, and you can see behind me pretty impressive specimens, all sorts of great arid plants for the landscape. This place though isn't really just about providing designer plants for inner city people who are looking for a dry garden, because when we start to scratch the surface though, there's so much more here. In my opinion, the vision behind Cactus Vision is about taking those, I suppose, novices, those people who are just starting out with these very interesting plants, and converting them into the die-hard maniacs like you and I. I'm going to show you around. I might even have a chat with the owners, and we'll see what sort of cool and incredible specimens are here. If you can hear me over the airplane noise, it's the airport right behind me. Planes going overhead, trains going past, it's absolutely hectic. Anyway, let's go check it out. Now, if you want any indicator that this is no ordinary succulent nursery, you only have to look at these plants behind me. What we've got here is a pair of Ceiba speciosa called the silk floss tree, so named for the beautiful delicate pink flowers that will come out during its flowering season. But the reason that I love these South American pachycaul trees, unsurprisingly, take a look at the stem, covered in these almost rose-like thorns. Absolutely stunning, and unlike anything I've ever seen in an Australian nursery before, let alone a succulent nursery. Incredible. These particular plants probably won't come as a big surprise to any of my Australian viewers. These are Xanthorrhea species, we call them grass trees, and these are massive specimens. They're not succulents per se, there's a few even bigger ones over here. They're not succulents, but they do belong in this kind of category of more arid plants. They can endure very long periods of hardship. Now, despite this looking like a cordex, what it actually is just the remnants of the grassy leaves that emerge from the top. And what will happen, they get this almost charcoal effect. You can see it's leaving an impact on my fingers because they survive through bushfires. The leaves will die back when they get burnt, and then sprout again, because the plant inside is protected by what is a very thick, woody outer exterior. Fantastic landscape plants. Now these specimens would be hundreds and hundreds of years old, and I know you're probably thinking, well, they must have been taken from habitat, this must be a problem. And yes, these are almost certainly habitat plants. They haven't been grown and cultivated in a nursery. But what happens is that when there's new developments in Australia, people who are licensed come out, they're contracted to remove plants from, I suppose, habitats that are about to be developed. They're extracted from the environment, cared for, nurtured, and given a new home in people's gardens. They cost a pretty penny, as you can imagine, for a plant that's hundreds of years old. And you know what? It's not ideal, but if these plants are going to meet a fate at the end of a bulldozer, or spend their days living in someone's garden as a beautiful feature plant, I know which option I'd prefer. So I've got no problem in this instance of seeing habitat plants in a nursery, because the alternative, well, not pretty. Great plants. In amongst a bit of an island of pachypodiums in the midst of everything, and you can see at the back some beautiful Lemuriis, but really wanted to point out these stunning flowering Pachypodium Baronii with quite unique, delicate pink flowers. Don't often get to see these in flower around these parts. They're native to Madagascar, quite an endangered species, subject therefore of a bit of poaching. These ones, however, have been expertly grown, and they're absolutely stunning. Really wonderful landscape plants. Incredible. Now you come out to this back section, which isn't even yet fully developed, and you'll see a collection of quite incredible landscape plants, but they're so well grown, they really could stand in as specimen plants in a collection in their own right. Whole collection of these incredible agave hybrids and cultivars. You've got Parodias, Cleistocactus, and unsurprisingly, some of my favourites along here, this beautiful collection of Pachypodiums. Have a look at this Pachypodium saundersii. Must be ancient, an absolute beast of a plant. So well grown. Not the sort of thing you'd typically find in a nursery, certainly not in Australia anyway. We've got Aluaudia, some more Pachypodiums here, huge Kalanchoe baharensis. And look at this, in flower. Absolutely amazing. So you can see along here a whole row of what I would regard as a pretty on-trend plant amongst the designer crowd in Australia. These are your Opuntia ficus indica Luther Burbanks, essentially spineless prickly pears, which, well, you only need to take a look at those flowers to see one of the aspects of why this plant is so popular. But the lack of spines, the lack of glochids, well, speaks to reason. But something like this, which can grow into a fairly architectural specimen, it's going to be a relatively popular plant. Where the real magic happens though is through these doors, where we're going to find all sorts of interesting and very rare plants, the sort of things that you're not going to find in typical retail locations and nurseries around Australia. So let's go inside and see what wonders await. Get a load of these. Not often that you see a shop selling your Lophophora williamsii cespitosa just on the shelves, price upon request. Now of course, if we're not familiar, these guys, these are the king daddy of our psychoactive cacti, loaded with mescaline, very popular therefore, not only with collectors, but with a whole other crowd indeed. And you can see here, this big daddy-o, or should we call it mummy-o, is about to flower. They are self-fertile, so this one's going to have seed pods soon, and then the whole cycle starts again. Such massive plants, Such incredible specimens. Would never have thought I would have seen these here today. They're certainly not cheap though, some of them. Now if we're talking about cacti that are really on trend, it doesn't surprise me that we would find Cereus forbesii spiralis. These are wonderful monstrose plants that somehow have developed this spiraling form, and over time they can transform into very, very large, almost tree-like plants with spiraling arms. That shape persists over time. Right next to them, another very trendy plant, we've got of course Cactus geometrizans fukuroku ryuzin boku, otherwise known as the blue booby cactus. Another very trendy and very interesting monstrose plant. But we're talking about the sorts of plants that you would typically find in a nursery selling to people who are looking for on-trend plants. Well, you'd be surprised to find something like this. Euphorbia abdelkuri. Now of course these are incredibly cool. Look at the size of them, and we can see their new growth up top. These are not what I would describe as trendy plants. These are collector plants, and it's really indicative therefore of how this is a place that's not just catering to that market, but people who are looking for a designer plant, something that's going to look great in the landscape. Well, yeah, inner city hipsters who are looking for something very trendy. This is a place that positions itself to transition those buyers into absolute cactus and succulent freaks who are going to go out and spend big money on a plant that you do not find in cultivation very often. Certainly never seen an abdelkuri for sale in the flesh in Australia before. How cool is that? The wonders never cease. Just near those abdelkuris, we've got some Cactus geometrizans elite crests. Look at those tight cresting forms on that blue body. Absolutely amazing plants. Beautiful monstrose Trichocereus. And then down here, much after my own heart, a whole collection of absolutely beautiful seed-grown Trichocereus mutants, monstrose and crested forms. I love these guys, probably why I've got so many of them at home. The further I step into this wonderland of plants, the more astounded I am. Couldn't tell you what this is. I'm assuming it's maybe a Ceropegia, certainly some member of the Asclepiadaceae family, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. I'm gonna have to find out a bit more about this. Really hits off on my love of the weird and the wonderful. How cool is that? Cactus just casually flowering and fruiting from that cephalium at the top there. You know, hanging around here like no one's business. This would be a specimen plant in most collections. Here's just one amongst many. Here with Erin, part owner of Cactus Vision. Tell me, I suppose the big question is, why cactus?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for everyone it's different. Like for Carl and I, very much the same. We were always collecting plants.
Yep.
And then we loved how sculptural they were compared to some other stuff that we had. And then when you open the hatch, you just sort of keep diving down and down and down. You're like, whoa, and then there's this, and there's this, and there's always more. And even the same forms of varieties, like same species can look so different from one plant to another. So it was one thing, like the monstrous, for example. It's one of my favorites because you never get too monstrous, Cereus privianus or anything like that looks the same. So it's pretty cool.
The part of Sydney that we're in, what sort of people are coming in here and buying plants?
So we've got a lot of people that have never seen cacti before, and they'd come here and think, I'm just going to pick out one cactus because I've seen that they don't need a lot of water and they're relatively low maintenance. And they come in and they're like, oh my gosh, there's so many different varieties. So we've got a lot of people that have never had any plants before or had one or two cacti. Then we get a lot of collectors that come in and just have a chat with us, and they might not necessarily find something they don't have, but they can play the cactus bingo with us and let me share about mine. online, we share photos. So it's a bit of a range, but definitely people that are just introducing themselves to cacti and the plant world come in a lot, and they get very overwhelmed and appreciative of it all. So it's cool.
And do you find that you convert people into kind of more die-hard? Because you've got some
100%.
pretty very rare plants here as well.
Yeah, I've had a few people that keep coming back, even since we've been open for like 5 weeks. A few people have come back every week, and I've just been like, do I need to, do I need to cap you here?
Yeah.
Like, do you have any more space? So it's really cute.
Yeah,
it's really
cool.
nice to see some people come back and stuff.
Any favourite plants?
I mean, I love all monstrous varieties. Abdulkari is really beautiful. We've got a few of those in at the moment. Spiralis, I love everything, to be honest. It's so hard to choose a favourite. Every month I'd change my mind.
Oh, yeah.
And if the same customer would be like, I've asked you before and you said 3 different plants. I'm like, yeah, because it changes.
Well, that's it. I mean, you go through phases, right?
Yeah. Because we're collectors first.
Yep.
We love the plants so much, that you want to share them with people, and sometimes it's like a matter of having this one plant that's 30 years old and be like, this is an example of what this bulb's going to look like.
Yeah.
This one's ours, that could be yours, and you can grow it and have the same experience as we had with enjoying them. So it's the dream job.
Yeah,
we named it Cactus Vision specifically because our dream was to one day open a nursery.
Yep.
So we got to our Cactus Vision this year, so we're living the dream.
Yeah. Now, we've got an absolute sea of your echinocactuses. But amongst that horde of very popular landscaping plants, here's 2 of what may be the coolest thing I've actually seen so far today. A pair of very old Copiapoa. Now, I'm no Copiapoa expert. I can't actually tell you what species these are specifically, and they're not labelled. Maybe Columna alba, maybe Cinerea. Don't exactly know. But again, how cool is it to see some Copiapoa in an Australian cactus nursery? These plants, of course, come from South America, up in the Atacama Desert. Absolutely wonderful species, very collectible and not often seen in cultivation. So there's this wonderful contrast here. Mass-produced Echinocactus grusonii next to these 2 very collectible and very rare Copiapoas. And if that doesn't speak to the nature of this nursery and just what they're trying to achieve here, then nothing does. Outstanding. Now, I guess it shouldn't really come as a surprise that Erin said that her favourite plants are monstrose, and I get the indication that Carl, the co-owner, shares that same love. Here's an amazing Trichocereus bridgesii monstrosus, the penis cactus, which I've talked about several times on this channel before. But check this one out. You turn it around, it's got a wonderful little secret. It's variegated. Amazing. Now that indeed is a rarity. If you ask me to name my favourite of all the South African species of euphorbia, I would ultimately have to settle on Euphorbia stellospina. And this one here is an absolute monster of a specimen. Now, the species is typified by these star-shaped spines. They're actually peduncles, what we call peduncles, which are the dried out remnants of the flowers. Not every single one of these spines was a fertile flower, but you can just tell based on the banding here, it almost gives you an indicator of the age of the plant from when it started flowering. And this must be a very old specimen indeed. Absolutely stunning. And it just so happens to live in a little alleyway of other huge plants like Euphorbia polygonus snowflake, another absolute beast of a plant right here. Now, I don't know too much about mammillarias, but what I do know is that this is a pretty massive plant. We've just got a whole heap of them all behind me. Gymnocaliciums as well. These plants normally get sold in nurseries the size of a 50-cent coin in Australia. This one's bigger than a grapefruit. It's about to flower as well. How good's that? Now, how do you know when a nursery actually takes care of their plants? Well, you can see here a whole bunch of Cereus spiralis cuttings being protected from the sun with a bit of shade cloth. Now, most nurseries in Australia, I would argue, will put their plants straight out into the blazing Sydney sun, and well, we know what happens when we do that. So really good to see that these plants are being appropriately cared for. Goes to show what a nursery can be when it's looked after and cared for by passionate and dedicated collectors, people who aren't just growing plants to make a bit of coin because they're worth a bit of cash, but are actually dedicated to the craft of growing plants, and arid plants in particular. This place blows my mind. Absolutely incredible. Look at this. Super chunky Trichocereus scopulicola. Gonna flower soon. Some opportunities to make some cool Trichocereus hybrids. How good. I showed you those Cereus spiralis plants before, but look at this one. I don't know if this is just mature or a particularly chunky phenotype of this plant. But this is the best Cereus spiralis I've ever seen in my life. Kind of almost finger-like protrusions along the ribs. Amazing plant. So that's Cactus Vision for you. Tell you what, coming in here, given the location in urban Sydney and the sheer size of the place, didn't really know what to expect. I certainly knew I was going to be seeing a lot of these kind of designer landscape plants like a Euphorbia amax here, but the absolute scope of rare and collectible plants defied expectations even for me. Tell you what, in Australia, finding these plants can often be a bit of a challenge, and you're often having to throw money at people you don't know online for slightly more obscure things. But this is a place that is clearly looked after and owned by very passionate cactus and succulent growers who have an eye for the rare, the weird and the beautiful. So anyway, that's it for today. I hope you learned something. I hope you had a good time. I'll catch you next time.